All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Strategies 2.0 Family Resource Center's Reciprocity and Participant Engagement webinar today. This is part 2 of the Vehicles for Change webinar series. Today we're going to talk about reciprocity and participant engagement. And this discussion will feature an interview with colleagues from the Little House by the Park, a family resource center in Guadalupe, California, that offers a great example of reciprocity and resident and participant engagement. Just to note, you are not able to talk because we have you all muted, and that's just to help us not get a lot of background noise and things like that. However, there will be times for discussion, and you will be able to use the chat function, submit any questions that you have. And also, if you feel comfortable, we will allow you to tell us and speak your question. All right. So, let's see here. Just so you know, these are some of our technical, overview. You have a control panel. It should be on the right-hand side of your screen, and that allows you to use the chat function as well as it controls your audio. So you will be able to decide if you want to use voice IP, which is the computer audio, or you can use telephone. So that function oftentimes seems to be a little bit more reliable. Sometimes we find that computer voice IP can go in and out. So you will be able to choose that in the audio tab on your control panel. If you choose telephone, you'll be able to call in to a number, and it will give you the access code for that. Also, here is your chat function, and you will be able to type in any messages that you have. If you're having any difficulties accessing anything, please let us know through the chat function. And also, if you have questions, they will go in there as well. We ask that you please hold all of your questions related to the content until we have those moments where we'll do that. Otherwise, it might get lost in that chat box. You can also raise your hand, and there's a little hand there, as you see, that you just simply click on, and that will tell us that you're raising your hand. Also, we have you muted, but once we have you unmuted, you will just be able to speak. However, if you do decide to mute yourself as a double protection against hearing any background noise, you can do so with the little, it looks like a little microphone right there. All right. Well, today's presenters are myself, Lydia Marquez. I'm a training consulting specialist with Strategies 2.0. I train and consult with family strengthening organizations all over Southern California, and my background has included case management with families, as well as working in early intervention as an early childhood infant mental health practitioner. And now I'll let Judy Sherman introduce herself.
Hi, thank you, Lydia. Good morning, everybody. I'm Judy Sherman, and I see many of your names on the list here who I've worked with in the 25 years that I've been working in this field, both with community-based nonprofits and local and state government. I've worked with California Department of Social Services, Family Resource Centers, and other cross-sector coalitions and networks and community change initiatives to help them advance their mission and enhance their programs, develop policy, and engage community, which is what we're going to be focusing on today. I have been privileged to author several resources for the field, including this Family Resource Center's Vehicles for Change Volume 2, as well as another monograph called Revisioning Case Management, which I did many years ago with Strategies and other partners. And also, I have curated a guide called the NICE Guide, which is Nonprofits Integrating Community Engagement, which is through the Building Movement Project, and it provides resources for organizations to integrate social service and social change efforts. So next slide, please, Lydia. So what we're here today to accomplish is to have the second webinar, as Lydia mentioned. And these webinars are meant to introduce you to a variety of topics that are presented in that Vehicles for Change monograph that I mentioned, and to go a little bit deeper into the topics in the monograph by offering examples, and also for opportunities for you to consider how you might apply them in your organizations from your different spheres of influence, meaning that we want everyone, no matter what your role is in the organization, to consider how you might take something from today and to apply it to your work with families and in your neighborhood and in your community. So what you see on the screen now are our objectives for today, which is to define reciprocity in the context of Family Resource Center engagement, to assess opportunities for families to contribute to the well-being of their families and their neighborhoods, and then to generate some strategies to maximize participation. So we have a full agenda to do that today. We'll do this little bit of an introduction. Would you go to the next slide, please? And we'll also want to find out who you are out there in our virtual room, and what it is that you do. So we'll take a couple of polls before we get started with the content. And then for folks who are new to Vehicles for Change, I'll give a very brief explanation of what it is. And then Lydia and I will share what Strategy's role is in making it accessible to the field. And then we'll dive into reciprocity, and I'll share a working definition with you as a core of participant engagement. And we'll hear from our colleagues at the Little House by the Park who are masters at this and have grown to authentically include residents and participants as part of their offerings. And then you'll have a chance to reflect on your organization along the way by participating in a couple of polls. And as Lydia said, we'll have a chance for questions. So let's go on to the first poll. Lydia, I'll let you manage the first poll, if you will, please.
Sure. So now that you know who we are, we'd like to get a sense of who is here today in our webinar. So I'm going to launch a poll, and everyone will be able to vote. So please go ahead and vote. All right. So go ahead and pick which organization you're from. And I'm going to close this in about 10 seconds now. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So we'll close that. And then let us look at who is here today. So it looks like 63% are from Family Resource Centers. We have 13% of our attendees are from other community-based nonprofits, 3% from First Five, 10% from county or city agencies, and 10% from statewide entities. So that's great. All right.
That's great. That's a really that's a good spread that we have. Typically, we do get more folks in webinars that are talking about FRC. So I think those of you who are in Family Resource Centers will see yourselves in this presentation, and those who are partners may be doing similar work, but also be able to understand more deeply how that happens within the Family Resource Center environment. So next poll, Lydia, please.
So now we're asking what best selects the title. Sorry, I'm having trouble talking. What title best selects what you do? So if you could go ahead and vote. So we have launched the poll now. So we'll give you about 20 seconds to do this. So I will count us down in about 5 seconds. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Go ahead and close this. And let us see here. So it looks like 38% are part of organizational leadership. We have 50% who are staff working with families, and 13% are capacity builders.
So folks, as you are looking at those numbers and as you're listening to the presentation, think about that bottom line there of Lydia, is it possible to go back to that or no?
Sorry, yeah, it is.
There we go. The constituent, the client, resident, community member, and participant. And remember early on when I mentioned that we want you to all think about the content of this through your sphere of influence. And that's kind of because we believe that the more information that people have in their positions to do their work about the organization and the context of their community, the better equipped they are to fully participate. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we move forward and hear from our presenters. Okay, one more little poll, Lydia, please. Thank you. Are you here, Lydia?
Oh my gosh, I was on mute. I was talking to myself.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry about that.
Just that what everybody shouldn't do.
Okay. So we want to know if you participated in the last webinar, the Family Resource Center's Vehicles for Change webinar number 1. It looks like a lot of you guys have already voted or starting to vote. So it's pretty simple, yes or no. And so I'll go ahead and close this up in about 5 seconds. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. And then it looks like a lot of you, over half of our participants today.
That's great. Yeah. Well, that gives us some information. It gives me some information about how much to tell you about the monograph itself and kind of how to direct my comments before I turn it over to our presenter. So thanks to all of you who came back, and welcome to all of you who joined us the first time. Lydia, you're going to mention that people have access to the first one, right, when we go on to the next slide.
Yes, I will. I will mention that. So just so you know, for those of you who are not familiar, Strategies 2.0 is an organization that is growing knowledge and networks for professionals working with families. And we are a collaboration between the Child Abuse Center in Sacramento, the Children's Bureau in Southern California, and San Diego State University, which helps us develop our curriculum. And so our job is really to provide training and technical support to professionals who are working in the family strengthening field. I did also want to mention that if you were not able to join us for our first webinar is available on our YouTube channel. Strategies 2.0 has a YouTube channel, and if you just search Strategies 2.0, you'll be able to find it. And we'd love for you to subscribe. It would be great to really get the latest webinars that we have, and we also post videos of our learning community convenings there as well. If you go into the playlist section of our YouTube channel, you'll be able to see there's a separate playlist for Vehicles for Change webinar series. So you'll be able to find the first webinar, Vehicles for Change webinar, as well as today's webinar on our YouTube channel if you wanted to go back and listen. So you'll see that we cut.
Lydia?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yes.
I'm sorry. Before you go on, I am not seeing the PowerPoint right now. I don't know if it's just me or if that's happening to others as well. I'm just seeing the white screen, the screen that says the title, and that you're the organizer, but not the PowerPoint.
Can you see it now?
No.
There
we go. Okay, now I see it. Thank you. Okay, maybe you want to show the YouTube slide, the YouTube channel slide, so folks, in case I'm not the only one that couldn't see that.
Yeah. I'm not sure what happened there, but so this is just what our YouTube channel looks like. So if anyone is interested, again, just search Strategies 2.0, and it will come up. Okay.
Great.
All right. You're welcome. So we are calling this series V for C for short. And this is a 4-part deeper dive into the themes, messages, and frameworks presented in Volume 2 of Vehicles for Change. Last time we did Incubators for Innovation. Today's webinar is about reciprocity and participant engagement. Next month, don't forget to tune in March 6th for Community Development FRC Style. And our last one will be on April 26th, the FRC as a Learning Organization. All of these webinars will be from 12 to 1:30, and you can go on strategiesca.org to register for all of them.
Thank you, Lydia.
Now,
and
I'll hand it over to Judy.
Okay, thank you. I want to mention that Vehicles for Change, Volume 2, as well as this PowerPoint are in your materials, and you can go to Strategies 2.0 resources to download them if you are interested in doing that. I'm going to give a brief background about Vehicles for Change. I'm going to kind of crunch a little bit for those of you who have heard this before. I think that I'm going to say some things that are different than what I said before, so I kind of expand your knowledge and not say the same thing more than once. Except to say that the original monograph was written in 2000, and it was very seminal at the time because it told the story of what family resource centers are. And it actually only had an example of only one FRC in the whole monograph. But it did shape the field, and it did shape what we see as family resource centers. And people today still depend on it to help them determine what is an FRC. In early 2015, the Office of Child Abuse Prevention and the SH Cal Foundation funded an effort that I was privileged to lead to figure out what has changed over that period of time since the original monograph was written, and how we have realized that true character of FRCs, how they've evolved, and how they're continuing to do their part in the field of family strengthening. So we conducted focus groups across the state, and I think some of you who are on the call participated in some of these focus groups. And we talked to over 100 people from family resource centers, other family strengthening organizations, funders, partners, including First Five, special needs networks, child welfare folks. And we heard about how one of the big messages was how we've struggled to define ourselves as a field. So we researched the elements of other fields like public health and social work, and pulled out those elements and aligned them with those that we thought fit for our field, which is what makes up that first section of the monograph, as well as identifying common purpose, values, practice methods, or the way we do our work, what kind of leadership we have in our organizations, and practitioners like all of you in our virtual room, and what professional development would look like for our field. So we say in the preface, in the same way a family needs a strong community in which to thrive, so do FRCs need a healthy environment that ensures consistent practice, training, evaluation, funding, and policy development. So this second monograph is a reflection of those voices that we've heard from through that time. Next slide, please, Lydia. So at the last webinar, I went through each of these items in some depth, but I'm just going to highlight the ones that are in bold. So these are the elements on this slide are reflective of some of those things that we addressed to illustrate our evolving field. And you can, in the recording, you can hear more detail about it, or you can go to the monograph itself and read about each one of these areas and how we have evolved from where we were in 2000 to where we are today. So I want to say that one of the things that changed, and this is, you'll hear a lot about this today, is how we refer to people. And we've also changed a little bit about how we talk about the people those people. And, we used to say they are clients that we serve. And now we talk about parents and residents and constituents who are people who we partner with. That doesn't mean we've left behind service provision. We see that as a critical part of our work, but we also know that when we move away from calling people clients and refer to them as parents, residents, or constituents, it reflects our belief, number one, that relationships are two-way, that they are reciprocal, and number two, that everyone, no matter what their situation, has something to contribute. In addition, we talked about, so this drove us to see the community, to see the community as a context where people live, not just a place for resources for services. And what happens here when we do that, it motivates us to think about our work beyond the walls of our building and move into the neighborhoods or the community so that people can participate in what's there and contribute to strengthening or changing those things that may be barriers to them thriving. When we talk about developing a view of the community as an asset with people and organizations and institutions as partners, then we look at them again as contributors, as people who have gifts and are able to contribute to the health and welfare of the community and not just the organization. And so in our next webinar, we're going to dig into that concept a little bit more as we take a look at asset-based community development. And last, we expanded our capacity to conduct advocacy only for the individual to include policy and issue advocacy. So when you take the work outside of the organization and see the structures that are barriers to thriving, advocating for change becomes important. So we moved, and we took the skills that we had as individual advocates and applied them to policy and issue advocacy. And of course, we are still evolving in all of this. Some organizations take a lead on one element and maybe are thinking about how to build on another one. So these webinars are really meant to spark your thinking about this. And we're also developing a new Family Resource Center training that's going to go deeper into all of these topics and really give the participants of that training a chance to practice and shape what's happening in their organization. So let's go on to the next slide, please. As I say, many of you are already practicing what I've just described, and I think that our challenge as a field is to develop some common language to describe these things that we all do so that they're recognizable to those in other fields in the same way that we recognize what a social worker does or a psychologist does or what happens in public health, although I think that's probably not as clear as social work and psychology because it is a new lexicon in our world. That when we think about what our role is as contributing to family, child, and community health and well-being, then we expand the definition for others who then come to us because we are the go-to organization for that kind of an activity. So this new monograph takes us back to what the dual focus of Family Resource Centers are and were imagined as sites of service and social change or social reform. And so this definition of FRCs is updated from the original monograph which showed the evolution of FRCs, that only one in the original monograph was from California. This volume 2 is all FRCs in California. So we've really grown to be exemplary in this field, and the intent of this monograph, which is called The Evolving Field, is to do just that and bring us together in some of these common practices. So as we dig into reciprocity, we'll see that the participants both receive from and contribute to their organization. It's not one way, it's a reciprocal relationship in their families and neighborhood through participation and leadership opportunities. So let's take the leap into the conversation about reciprocity. So as an organization moves from providing services and resources to people as clients to engaging them as residents or constituents, it may need to reflect on its current practice and also consider how participants are perceived in the organization. So often this results in viewing service beneficiaries, if you will, less as people who need something from us and more as people who have something to contribute to each other, to their families, to their organizations, and to the neighborhood or community. And while there are many definitions of community engagement, and when I was preparing this and did a search, there were so many ways to look at community engagement. Our focus will include reciprocity, which frames participant engagement as a mutually beneficial exchange. And that mutually beneficial is a really critical concept. Exchange of knowledge and resources to meet a common goal. And within this definition is an expectation of partnership between the members of the organization and members of the neighborhood or the community. It's one of the primary values that sets family resource centers apart from other family support delivery platforms. And again, the purpose of the webinars is to really highlight what makes these kinds of organizations different delivery platforms for family and community well-being. So belief in reciprocity and mutuality creates an environment where people who participate in the activities of the organization benefit from mutual exchange, and the organization and the community benefit from those activities. So reciprocity is a value of community engagement. It's a belief that we follow that drives our behavior, and a mutually beneficial exchange of knowledge and resources to meet a common goal. That's the definition that we're working from today. So next slide, please. So reciprocity moves us to think about participant engagement as direct services and opportunities to develop mutual benefits for families, organizations, and communities. And it's founded on the belief that everybody has something to contribute, and that if we view participants from this lens, we have to change how we work with people. If we have the value drives our behavior in how we interact with people. And then this approach strengthens and builds community by including everybody as contributing members at whatever level they are capable of contributing at a particular time. So think about it from your own sphere of influence. So direct services are important, but not enough. This is the first of the basic tenets of reciprocity. Services alone cannot make long-term change. We don't leave services behind, but we have to include other things in our mix of activities and opportunities. It recognizes the strengths and abilities of residents and participants, creates a mutually beneficial society, creates community, and it does that by bringing people together for healthy activities that contribute to growth and development. And of course, it reflects inclusion, cultural sensitivity, and trust. So we want to share with you a spectrum of participant voice and engagement so that you have a framework to think about this. Next slide, please, Lydia. This spectrum is adapted from the Building Movement Project. I updated it. It had 8 steps along the way, and it used the word client instead of participant, which tells you how long ago it was done. And Building Movement Project is actually an organization whose mission is to lift up the voices of those who are usually left out of the center. And I was kind of amused by the fact that they were using the word client. So it's important to understand this spectrum of activities so that you can measure where you are and then think about how to move along. The status of current practice and the extent to which the organization has the capacity and our interest to engage in a specific activity is helped along by having a definition. So these are the areas to consider when growing or strengthening a reciprocal relationship with participants. After I go over these, we're going to ask you to tell us where you think your organization lands. We'll do another little poll about which one of these describes best describes the type of constituent engagement in your organization. So as you're thinking about these, kind of think about what your organization does. So staff-directed is where staff are providing resource and referral, and of course, depending on the relationship, maybe engaging in case management or leading a class. Participant-informed describes organizations that may hold health and or resource fairs, and this is a kind of event when residents participate voluntarily. So their role is to gain knowledge or resources, mostly as a recipient. So the definitions of participants are educated about a project's purpose and invited to participate. Participant consulted is where staff asks participants for input or feedback to use to define a program. So this is when an organization surveys people or holds focus groups to identify needs or interests that might inform programming. This would be sort of your basic needs assessment or your needs assessment. And the decision of how the program is delivered in this way is the decision about how the program is delivered and evaluated is done by staff. Staff initiated is where staff identify a problem and craft a solution and then invite participant involvement along the way. This is similar to participant consulted, but it includes participants at each step of program development and delivery and evaluation as contributors, but most of the decisions are still in the staff area. And then the participant initiated with a little C against it isn't because it's copyrighted, it's because it's called complementary. So when participants or residents are invited to develop activities that are delivered by them at a center that are complementary to current programs. So this could be in the form of a parent-child play group that's an offshoot of a parent education class, for example. And then participant-initiated is where residents identify a problem, craft a solution, and invite staff support. And here the participants respond to an issue that's pressing for them in their neighborhood or their community, and they have support from the Family Resource Center to develop and design it. Those of you that were on the webinar last month heard from El Modena that had a walking group as part of their program, and then those folks moved on to independently advocate for healthy food in local stores. So they found the issue that they wanted to address, and then they went to the agency and said, can you support us in our effort? So these are the 6 levels that we're looking at, and we're going to ask you to go to the poll on the next slide and select the number that best describes the type of engagement your organization or those you work with conducts. And that word best describes, we don't want to put you in a box, or but just think about it as the best fit for your organization. Lydia, do you want to help with administration?
Sure. So you'll see the poll open, and basically we want to select the number that best describes the type of engagement your organization conducts. So go ahead and do that now, and we will close this in 5 seconds. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So here we go. Let's see here. Let's share the information here. So it looks like 35% of you are staff directed, 30% participant informed, 13% participant consulted, 17% staff initiated, and 4% participant initiated.
Great, thank you. So this is can you leave it here for a minute, Lydia, before you go on?
Yeah.
This is a common approach where most of the things that we do in our organization are designed and developed by staff or participants. And that as we move towards staff-initiated, participant-initiated activities, we build that reciprocity, and we build the opportunity to do that. So I'm very excited to introduce you to an organization that, as I say, are masters at participant-initiated activities, and will share with you their spectrum of activities and how they've gone about having a balance across the different kinds of activities that they do. At the end of the webinar, after you hear from them, we'll invite you to tell us about your aspirations for this, and if it interests you. And as I say, that will inform how we develop the Family Resource Center training that's coming up in the next fiscal year, where we'll dive deeper into this and support organizations to learn the tools to become, to develop reciprocity. So thank you, Lydia. I'm very privileged to have met Judith Gonzalez, who's one of our presenters, at a deep dive into the Vehicles for Change monograph in Santa Barbara County with their network there. And as we were talking and engaging together around the topics, it was clear that Little House on the Park has incredible programs and activities and leadership that they have truly partnered with their community. So I thought, wow, who's better than they are to help us all learn more about how to be effective in this. So as you can see, Guadalupe, California is in Santa Barbara County, and this is the Little House and their logo. Can we go to the next slide so I can introduce our speakers, please? So we've been working together, Samuel Duarte, the Executive Director of Little House by the Park, Nick Rasso, the Community Engagement Coordinator, and Judith Gonzalez, who is the Case Manager and Special Events Coordinator. We've talked several times on the phone, and each time I learn more about Little House by the Park, and I'm going to move forward with this in an interview style, so I'll be asking some questions, and Samuel, Nick, and Judith will help us understand how they conduct their work. So thanks to all of you for joining us today. Samuel, can you start by telling us a little bit about Little House by the Park, please?
Sure. Thank you so much, Judy, and thank you all to the organizers for this invitation. So the Little House by the Park was established by the Guadalupe Union School District in 1993 to help out with the just basic services with case management, referral services, interpretation, translation services. And we were also organizing their health fairs, their dental screenings. So that was our role. And it was funded through partly through medical billing, through LCAP, and but the bulk of it was, of course, through grant writing. So that was 1993, and it was focused on strictly case management, basic need aspect of the work. And the mission, which is a new mission that we came up in the last 2 years, is the Little House by the Park is to offer essential services and to work alongside Guadalupe families, connecting the arts, education, advocacy, and leadership development for the creation of a more equitable and robust community. So this is a new mission statement that shows the leadership development and parent engagement portion of the work that we've been moving towards for the last 8 to 10 years. Which we didn't have, and our annual budget, we're a staff of 5, is $350,000, around the $350,000 a year. Do you want me to go a bit into more of how we move towards the parent engagement?
Well, can you tell us a little bit about the neighborhoods, Guadalupe, more specifically, who your constituency is?
Okay, so Guadalupe has a population of around 8,000 people. 90%, around the 90% are Latino and Mexican, and it rates among the highest poverty areas in the Santa Barbara County, with a rate around 16.1%. The median household income here is 44,000, while in the county has a threshold of 63,700 for a family of four. And this is not counting a lot of the undocumented individuals who are not in the official statistics. So the poverty rate is likely higher than what's projected.
And what do you have a little bit of information about people's education level and also gender, any kind of demographics that could help people understand your world there, your landscape?
So let me see if I have that statistic, but yeah, so the only about 56.9% of individuals in Guadalupe have a high school degree or equivalent, and only 7% of Guadalupe residents have a bachelor's degree. And so on an average, the center on an average day, we serve around 20 to 30 families or individuals. Our board of directors is pretty representative of the community. It consists of 80 Latino members, female, and 40% are from the Guadalupe community. So that's a sort of rough some of the statistics that we're dealing with here.
Great, thank you. Lydia, would you go to the next slide, please? So Samuel, can you talk a little bit about the history of how you've moved from service-only agency to the kind of meaningful engagement that you have today?
Right. So around 8 years ago, we organized a family leadership summit in Santa Maria, and we brought parents from different agencies from our community, including from Guadalupe community. About 200 folks attended that summit, and the way it was organized, we invited administrators, city officials, and people from the higher tiers of different agencies and institutions to have a conversation with the parents at a more equalized level. And so the way it was facilitated, there was language access that was pretty high quality in the way it was all set up. And parents out of that leadership summit, our parents, which was a group of 10, came up with a few community projects that they were interested in. Particularly, they wanted to address leadership development, but in engagement, but in a much more meaningful way. Meaning they didn't want to be invited to the school district just to ride in a bus or to help out with fundraisers. They wanted to lead some projects. They also wanted to enhance their own education, touch on the health and wellness of the community, and also learn more strategies on parenting. So out of that, they conceptualized the Guadalupe Literacy Theater, which was our very first. We had a budget of about $500, and parents went to they donated their own material to create a stage. They created their own a script for a play that addressed, encouraged reading within the home and reading in general. And also they addressed topics on how to be more culturally aware and sensitive. And so they told their story through this project. They've been telling their story and changing it up every year. But basically, it was our first fully parent-led project in Guadalupe that we collaborated with the school district. So they were the ones that helped with that. And of course, us as staff, we assisted them with the technological aspects of the work and just helping them facilitate meetings and organize. And so we also, actually the last 2 years, we broke away from the Guadalupe Union School District and became our own nonprofit. Something that helped was rebranding our agency. We used to be known as the Guadalupe Community Center. and the community actually were the ones who named the Little House by the Park. It came from a few focus groups. So rebranding was very important. And now what we see in the agency is it's become really a community center rather than a place where services are dispensed. But we expect more in terms of their engagement and leading different projects. And one more thing. So out of that family leadership summit, they conceptualized what they call the Guadalupe Parent Academy that touches on those 4 areas, key areas that they wanted to work on. And under each of those areas, parents actually, they have a say. They get to change up the classes and just be more involved in that way.
That's great. I have so I was going to ask Nick to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but I have a question before you go on that kind of goes back a little farther, because you've really evolved from being a service organization, a service-only organization at that kind of left-hand side of the spectrum, where you had staff-directed programs that were information and referral. You had some classes, just the same way it was described, and you've moved along that. And then you said it kind of started with a summit, but I'm kind of curious what sparked that summit. So that sounds like that was the event that was the shift for you. Can you talk about what led up to that caused you to want to participate in that, or is that going too far back?
No. So before the summit, I attended a 1-week retreat through Just Communities, who they work in social justice in the social justice arena. And out of that, 4 of us from the community came back to our own communities, and we began to organize this leadership summit. That's what inspired it. So pretty much seeing that a lot of times parents were being asked to be at the table, but seeing that they weren't participating. A lot of times they're just there to fill in a box. And so we wanted to really have them be there, but also giving them the tools and the experience so that they feel comfortable speaking up and really sharing their skills and their talents and their educational life experience. And so a lot of our approach to the work is based on popular education angle, which is, we value what the community has to say without the traditional education or degree. I mean, sounds very simple, but really it's a change of sort of a mindset of the help mentality. I'm going to help you, and really kind of be vulnerable and once they start their projects, not to kind of resist to jump in every sort of at every chance you get. As I think as leaders in our own field and experts, I think we have the tendency to want to step into every aspect of that. But that's probably been one of the toughest parts. But if we are patient with that process, parents come out on the other side. We've seen some amazing leaders come out of that, and leaders that Nick is going to speak how parents have actually changed local policy and have attended statewide committees to change particular policies that affect our community.
Great, thank you. Lydia, would you go to the next slide? I'm going to ask Nick to talk a little more deeply about the Parent Leadership Academy, and so to tell us a little bit more about opportunities for participation by parents and kind of how it's determined what to offer. Nick, can you help us with that?
Yeah, hi everyone. So the way the Parent Academy was determined was, like Sam touched on, we asked some of the community members what they wanted to see within the Parent Academy. They mentioned they wanted to see health and wellness classes, parenting classes, leadership development workshops, and educational classes. So what we did is we got together with various community organizations, such as Allen Hancock College, which is our community college here in Santa Maria, and various other nonprofits to build this parenting parenting classes, Parent Academy, and we came up with various English classes that we offer, sewing classes, which is our most popular class that we hold, tobacco prevention classes, college readiness workshops, budgeting workshops, and various health-related workshops such as diabetes, Alzheimer's, and mental wellness workshops.
Right, and I want to add that part of the Parent Academy class, we have the leadership development component, is the section where parents are actually advocating within city or the school level. They attend their meetings, and we offer them stipends to attend these meetings and report back to the group of mostly women, and they report back to the group and right, once a week at least they meet, right?
Yeah, so they meet once a week. They go to these city council meetings and school board meetings, and they report back to us and let us know what's going on within the school board and the citywide. So that way we can know what's going on, and we can go to these meetings and just kind of represent what opinions we have or what we want to just share with the city council members.
Thank you. So for those of you that were on the last webinar or have looked at the Vehicles for Change, we've taken a list of services from Family Resource Centers from being just a list of activities and put them into a structure where we can identify, yes, these are the well-being services or the basic skills. These are the health and well-being services like classes. These are civic engagement opportunities, and then these are community development opportunities. And I think as I'm listening to Nick and Samuel so far, they've really covered all four of those areas in terms of what kinds of activities and programs and opportunities happen at the Little House by the Park. So they do have services for people who need services. They do have classes. All across the spectrum of literacy and tobacco avoidance, as well as civic engagement, going to city councils, and then community development, which is doing something with that information. So that's on page 27 of the monograph, and next time I'm going to put a slide in so that what you're hearing people talk about, you can see how it fits into that structure, and that structure may be a way for us as a field to define how we work. So that's just a little bit of Judy sideline. Can we go to the next slide about measuring success? So people always want to know, how do we know what we do is successful? How do we measure our success? So Judith has agreed to tell us a little bit about some of the things that happen at Little House by the Park in terms of how to measure success. So Judith might be muted. Lydia, can we see if we can help, Judith, whether she's...
Judith is unmuted. So Judith, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I'm coming in now.
So we'll wait one few seconds, and then if not, maybe I'll ask Samuel and Nick to respond to this question. Judith is not in the United States of America at the moment, so having trouble unmuting herself. So Samuel or Nick, could I ask one of you to speak to this information, this question?
Yes, so the question was, how do we measure success?
Yes, please.
So we measure success by seeing how many attendees we have at our various workshops. Our self-esteem workshop for youth, we had 15 youth show up in 2017, 2018. Our mental health counseling and referrals, we have about 75. Cultural outings, for example, PCPA, Allen Hancock College has a PCPA program where they offer us.
Can you say what PCPA is, please?
Yes, I believe it stands for Pacific Arts, Pacific Cultural Art.
It's a
Or
local
something.
Okay,
theater.
that's fine.
I'm not exactly 100% sure. Yeah. So they offer us various tickets, various free tickets to go to these plays, and we took 80 students this past summer to a YPP program, which allowed students to participate in a workshop and participate in a play, and they depicted the various issues going on at the border at the moment through art. So they went out there. We had 80 of them. We have about parenting 40 students, 40 members who go to the parenting classes, and the talk, read, sing campaign. We have about 50, and so on and so forth. So we just measure the importance of how many community members were able to obtain to come out to our various classes, workshops, and opportunities that we have to offer here at the center.
And some of the
Great. And go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Sam. I'm sorry. No,
It's-
Samuel, please.
Some of the measurements are actually related to actual policy change. So the parents, for example, speaking up at the city hall to bring more affordable housing, it was them that, the city had voted that down, and they organized to advocate for more affordable housing. And the second time around, they were successful. They were able to advocate for language access at school, at the school district level. But not just language access in the way we understand language access, but from a social justice perspective, in how to be conscientious in creating an equitable space. A lot of times we think that, as translators or interpreters, we are providing a service, and in a sense it is, but in a sense it isn't. It depends how we think of what that is. It takes a different type of training to be able to be conscientious of that. Let's not just see it as a technical, but as a actual equity issue. And so there's a few examples of how parents are engaged and how we measure success. So I just want to really quickly, in one of the polls that you had here, and the aspiration for engagement, just want to sort of, part of our model is that 50% of our agency is staff direct, but of our programs are staff directed. And the other 50%, I would say, it's participant initiated. So there's a very clear division on how we've actually evolved from being only staff directed to having more of a collaboration with parents in the community as real partners.
And then lastly, I was just going to touch on our educational goals. So not only having them attend these classes, but also retain the information. So obtaining their GEDs, learning English, learning about their mental health, and our computer classes, learning how to go on Microsoft Office, learning how to create a resume and whatnot. So it's just obtaining that educational goal as well.
That's great. Thank you. I want to take it just a moment and go back to that point that you just made, Samuel, about 50% staff directed and 50% participant directed. I think just by the fact that you can articulate those percentages says that you're paying attention to it, and you're using that spectrum as a valid way to actually manage your programming, so that if you are a higher percentage of staff directed than you want to be, you have a way to use that as a measurement if you are going to be moving towards more participant initiated activity. And Samuel, when we were talking last time, you made an observation about that spectrum. Mm-hmm. And I think you said, well, do you remember what you said?
We were basing it on a slide. I don't know if you've shown that slide already.
Yes, we did. And we'll go back to it when we do the aspirational poll. But and we can wait till we go back to it so people can see it when because it was very enlightened, and I want you to share it with people. But we'll wait a minute on that.
Okay.
Can we go to the next slide, please, Lydia? Nick, I think you were going to tell us a little bit more about the impact of parent engagement in with some of these accomplishments from the parent engagement.
So here at the Little House, we have a group called the Community Changers, which consists of about 7 to 10, mostly ladies who participate in civic engagement throughout the community. They're the ones that really are the vehicle for all this change within the community. So here on this slide, you see some of the policies that they changed and some of the stuff that they advocated for, such as successfully advocating for 30 affordable housing units in Guadalupe, coordinating and leading local candidate forums for city council. They were fighting for workers' rights, ending workplace sexual violence, helping secure LCAP funding from the school board in order to hold our parent academy classes, and then increasing registered voters and civic engagement through their reading festival that they hold every year. So they're really the forefront of what we do here in terms of parent engagement. These ladies really have a say and a following within the community. They plan all their events out. They go and market. They recruit other parents within the community to come out to the events, which is very important. So without them, we wouldn't be able to really have the parent engagement that we offer.
Terrific. So let's go to the next slide and let me ask you about what kind of training and support is offered to them. I've touched on it a little bit, but if we can be kind of focused on this question. Nick, I think you were going to answer it for us and tell us a little bit about how how their capacity is lifted to be able to make these significant changes.
Yes, so we pretty much invite our community changers to everything that we have in terms of foundation interviews. So every grant that we apply for, they're there, they're sitting in the interview, they chime in. They're also involved in our board of directors, as Sam talked about earlier. We have about 4 community members and 2 to 3 community changers who are actually in our board of directors. So they're able to get those skills. They run the meetings. One of the community changers is actually our president, who runs the meetings. She holds the minutes, and she just facilitates the whole meeting. They also share their skills, so it's a kind of a peer-to-peer education that we talk about here. So they're experts on certain things, cooking, sewing, creating different projects by hand. So they hold these workshops and they teach the community about what they do. That way the community can also be educated on that. They hold various fundraisers and they lead all their projects, and without me pretty much telling them what to do. So they're the ones that kind of tell me what to do, and then I go out there and just help them and support them in any way that I can.
Yeah, and I just wanna add to that some of our classes, the city of Guadalupe wants to move to economic revitalization, downtown revitalization, and usually what happens is the sector that we work with of the community are a lot of times are left out. We want to make sure that they're aware of entrepreneurship opportunities if ever, as the city moves towards the revitalization, economic revitalization of downtown, so that businesses owned by our parents are part of that plan. So that's a long-term movement. And one more thing, even though our community changers are mostly women, it took us a while to realize that, because traditionally men don't want their women being involved or engaged or going to late night meetings. We began to realize that the men just by the fact that they were either not being cared for from their perspective in the traditional way, we realized that they were actually sacrificing as well. With some of the ladies, it took a while for that to evolve, but we appreciate that their absence doesn't mean that they're not actually supporting the work, or they're not helping us out with the programs and with the women being more involved.
That's great. So you're starting to make sure that economic opportunities within the in the neighborhood, in the community of Guadalupe are increased for people by making sure that people know what's happening and what efforts there are for improvement, so that people who do have businesses can participate. And I don't know, I would guess that some of those people are also the partners of the women who are in your community change group.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you. So on the next slide, you'll see a picture of a book cover. And when I was researching the Little House, I came across this, and I wanted Samuel to tell us the story of this publication called Small Town Big Dreams. Can you tell us about it, and then tell us where people can find it?
Sure. So this book we organized and published back in about 8 years ago. And the idea for this book was because our center is stigmatized by a particular demographic, by a particular sector of our community as the place where you come and get help, or you come and get food stamps. We wanted to make sure that people kind of knew who their community was and who was coming here. And so what we did is we intentionally reached out to community leaders. There was a city council member who participated in this, and we asked them to write about their experiences in Guadalupe, how they came here, and just their overall background, to try to build that sense of community, and so that people can learn who they are. And so what was awesome about this anthology is that we did a few readings across the county, and folks who wouldn't otherwise work together were actually reading side by side, and it was pretty successful. And the proceeds for this actually go to the parent education programs that we have here, and you can find it in Amazon. Actually, if you look for the Small Town Big Dreams, it should come out in the search.
That's great. So it's still in circulation.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Spanish and English, both languages. Mm-hmm.
Oh, terrific. Excellent. Thank you. So let's go to the next slide and talk about staff involvement. I think, from the perspective that we have held for many years, the Family Resource Center perspective, it's always important to think about how we work with staff as a parallel process to how we work with families, meaning that we want to ensure that people are well trained, they're well prepared with the resources that they need to be successful, in the same way that we do that for families. So I'm always curious about how staff are lifted up to do work beyond service provision, so that they feel like they have the tools that they need to support people who are being leaders in the community. So, my question is how are staff involved, and how are they prepared to support parents and residents? I think,
yes.
Judith, okay, I'm going to let you answer this time.
Yeah, Judith, I don't think she was able to log in.
Yeah.
Here, yeah.
Okay.
So yes, staff development, one of our Just Community, I mentioned Just Communities, they've been one of our biggest supporters, and vice versa. But we've sent our staff to some of their trainings, particularly in I mentioned interpretation. They have a social justice perspective. So what we do is we've sent staff to trainings that deal with the technical aspect of interpretation, for example, and then the social justice aspect of interpretation. We also we've help facilitate some of the PETA courses for parents, and just have them be more engaged in terms of the social community organizing work. So we don't only want our staff to be behind a computer necessarily and logging in, numbers and stats, but we want them to actually be aware of how to the best strategies to organize the community, which is a lot of times has a different skill set.
Mm-hmm. Could I ask you to say make a couple of points about what you mean by interpretation from a social justice perspective? How that's different than what we would think of as interpretation?
Right. So from a social justice perspective, interpreting from a social justice perspective kind of requires simply like setting up the space. How do you set up the space? Where do you set the interpreter? Where do you set the headphones and everything that's going to be used? Is the interpretation you're doing, are you prepared to do the interpretation? What are the steps in order to prepare for that particular interpretation? Or do you have the materials ahead of time? The terminology of, are you going to walk in there and know what you're talking about or be familiar with that terminology? And so a lot of times from our, in my experience in working with service agencies, a lot of times we're asked to interpret sort of on a whim, or I've heard of, janitors being pulled and sort of just interpret that way. But social justice makes institutions aware that they need to invest in real training. And what I mean by the more of the technical is not seeing it as just the terminology, for example, but actually be aware of how to set up the space and also knowing your place as an interpreter, as a conduit of information, and not somebody that is, again, the help mentality. It's a sort of a switch of roles when you feel like you're not speaking for the client, and you sort of take that role of just being the conduit for whatever that they're saying. So you're not advocating for them. You're simply
Right.
there to communicate.
Right.
Ideas.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's very clear. I appreciate that. Can we go to the next slide, Lydia? I asked Samuel to send me his list of partners, and you'll see what a diverse list it is when the slide comes up. Samuel, can you tell us how these partners contribute to your success and maybe highlight one or two with some information for us?
Okay, I'm not seeing the slide.
No.
Oh, there it is. Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Oh, there it is.
There we go.
Yeah. Awesome. So here are some of our partners that we were working for a very long time. But one of our newest that we tapped into once we started moving into parent engagement was the McCune Foundation and the Fund for Santa Barbara. We weren't funded by them traditionally because they didn't fund programmatic programs, but they did like the parent engagement portion. And the Santa Barbara Foundation was actually one of our earlier supporters to the Thrive Initiative. We were part of the Thrive Initiative about 10 years ago, and we were invited to be part of 4 other communities. And they funded the parent engagement portion, which our agency became very strong in, and we continue with that with other grantees. The Dune Center, we collaborate with them. We do fundraisers. Allen Hancock College, they're doing that summer program that they're sending our kids. It was pretty awesome. Allen Hancock PCPA, their theater, they've been doing 2 years in a row. They've been doing this summer program for some of our kids, where they train them in theater for a whole week. It's an intense theater workshop, and they really adapted their curriculum for our community. So they invited some professional Latino actors to come from the Bay Area to specifically for our community. So that was pretty awesome. And then Smooth is the public transportation. They provided us those students free transportation for that week-long event. yeah, I can, go on. It's so much of what these partners have done. There's actually a lot more than these, but I didn't have room.
Thank you. How about go to the next slide, Lydia, please. And people always want to know what you think are the key drivers of success. What are some of the highlighted things that you've done that you would say these were important to us getting from where we were to where we are? Samuel, do you want to start?
Yeah, these are all important, but one of them that we haven't mentioned is the outreach and communication. One of the things that has been very helpful is producing our own localized flyers or our promotional material. We do that on our end, and that's made a big difference in that I think people relate, or they can tell when something is produced in a sort of institutionalized way, I would say. I don't know. There's a sort of a disconnect, but if they see their community in the flyers, or they see people they know, or then they're more likely to not only read the material but respond to those activities. So that's something that we all take on. And then we brought in a community, Nick, who is a parent engagement. We didn't have that position before. And a parent engagement coordinator who helps to organize everything that the parents, their ideas and programs that they want to get started.
Boy, that must be a vibrant position, Nick. Do you want to say anything else about that?
Yeah, I touched on it a little earlier when I first came in 6 months ago, and I met the community changers. It was, like you said, very, very vibrant, very different. It was like working with my mom, pretty much. It was a little funny. So they're all very relatable, and I'm able to relate to them as well on what their goals are and what they want to accomplish. So it's been fun. They're great. They have a lot of different ideas and goals that they want to obtain for Guadalupe. They're all very passionate about this community, and it helps that they're all, part of the Hispanic community and which in 96% of Guadalupe is Hispanic, so they know what the community wants. So it's been fun. I've enjoyed it.
So I just want to reflect back to you that I think it's interesting that when I asked you about your job, you talked about the people who you work with, and that to me says that your work is driven by them and you are responsive to them rather than the other way around. So thank you for that. Lydia, can you go to the next slide, please? And this is the last of the group, and I want to thank Nick and Samuel and Judith, who wasn't able to participate, but definitely was my entree to this organization and helped us prepare to take a look back at this at this spectrum of engagement and think about all that you've heard in terms of how Little House works across each one of these. And Samuel, this is where I'm going to ask you to do your reflection about this spectrum that you had mentioned when we were planning.
Right. So it was interesting to see, again, before we moved more towards the parent engagement, parent-led work, that we were mostly, of course, staff-directed. So it was 1 to 6. And now we are both. Some of our funding and some of our basic needs work and case management goes from 1 to 6. And the work that Nick is doing, and all of us are really participating, is actually from 6 to 1. So it goes both ways. And I think that was the sort of the 50-50 percent that I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm grateful that you mentioned that, because without us talking, it naturally bubbled up for you to understand how your activities are balanced like that. So in my mind, that illustrates the point that one alone cannot make long-term change. You have to have a balance of service and community engagement, leadership development, social justice work. And that changes the conditions of the community that people live in and gives them a place to actually mobilize the skills and the capacity that they've learned through the staff-directed and participant-informed and consulted activities. So I want to invite those of you who are on the call, if you would like, to choose which one of these is what your aspiration is for engagement, if it's changed for you at all after you've heard from Little House by the Park, and what's the number that best describes your organization's aspiration. Lydia, can you help with this poll here? Well, there we go.
Okay.
So here, thank you. Oh, that was fast. So it looks like most of you are aspiring to have your organization work more in the service area than move toward the kind of participant consulted. I wanted to pull up the original numbers here and see what it was that you had said before, and I had that with me and I just put it away. Sorry. I believe that actually the numbers have not changed very significantly. It was 35% staff-directed, 30% participant-informed, 13, 17, and 4. So these numbers haven't changed at all since the first poll. So that's kind of a curiosity to me that your aspirations are in that area that you had said you best describes you now. I would hope that what you've heard from Little House and hopefully opportunities to think about this work will motivate you to join us at the Family Resource Center training that we'll be doing through strategies next year, and think about how to build more robust participant engagement. It looks like not everybody was able to vote, but we just use these polls as a way to get some idea about what's happening and what you're thinking. So again, I want to say thank you to our speakers, but I also want to give those of you who are participating a chance to ask any questions or make any comments about what you've heard. And I'm going to let Lydia and Alma Tovar, who's helping her out, manage any questions. Lydia, do you want to take over from here? Go to the next slide, please. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to. All right. So we will take some questions or comments that people would like to share. So we just ask that you please put those in the chat box. Let's see here. We have
people who raised their hand.
Do we see here? I gotta find out. So we have Primitiva Hernandez. I don't know if you wanted to ask a question or if you wanted to put a comment in. I'm gonna unmute you. Did you have a question?
Why don't you unmute her?
Yeah, she's unmuted, so. Okay. Well, if you would like to ask a question later on, you can go ahead and raise your hand again, and I will unmute you if that's what you'd like to do. So I do have a question, actually, that was raised by someone and sent to us. So I'd like to go ahead and ask. So for the folks at Little House by the Park, someone was asking, what is the mix of grants, contracts, and individual donations that support your work?
Could you repeat the question? Did you say the percentage or just?
Yeah, what is the mix of grants, contracts, and individual donations that support your work? So they just want to know about your funding.
My funding. So our funding is we're getting funded by First Five, Can County wide grant. Those support our case management. We have an MOU with the school district actually since we separated, and so we provide them with the classes, which fulfills their LCAP requirement through the state. And so we make sure that we're offering the parents in the school district that portion, and also case management. We're moving towards case management, and we also do interpretation training. Judith, one of our staff, is certified through community training interpretation to do those classes, and so we've gone out to different networks, different service agencies to provide that. And like I mentioned before, some of our parent engagement is mostly supported through the McCune Foundation, Santa Barbara Foundation, Roy and Ida. So more of those private, traditional, non-traditional funding sources. As far as individual donations, we're building towards that. And so that's
Lost Samuel. I don't have any audio on my side.
Oh.
Oh, there you are, Lydia.
Okay. And then
we want to go back to the question and answer slide, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is like going on, having a mind of its own today. Okay. And then, sorry, go ahead.
It looks like the poll was not the new poll. People are saying that they didn't have a chance to answer.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we had a glitch with that poll, if it was trying to bring up the same one from before, so we apologize for that. Someone else had a question of how do you prepare residents for board positions?
Yeah, the McCune Foundation has given us funding for some training. They've attended the what was that training? The community organizing.
Was it in Washington?
No, there was one here in Santa Maria. But through PETA, also through Just Communities, we send them to do those trainings. They learn how to facilitate through Just Communities. So Just Communities is pretty awesome whenever they hold these workshops for parents, they actually train parents themselves to facilitate it. So they're very big in making sure that parents have that experience. The promotoras too have been pretty awesome. They get training through them and they learn how to facilitate. But in terms of the board, we make sure that we meet with them and go over anything that needs to be touched on before our meetings. They also have their own board, so they're not only involved in our agency board, but the community changers run their own board, and so some of them are getting double the experience in that. We have parents who are in the LCAP. They join those. They go to those meetings, and just the exposure. I mean, just having them taking turns attending board meetings and city council meetings. That's a big thing. And Nick is always there. So Nick is always there to answer questions. He attends with them, and then when they report back, they have those conversations. So that's part of how we make sure that we support them.
Thank you. Dennis, one of our participants, Dennis Haynes, has a question. What is the process for vetting parents and volunteers? And, she's asking, like, do you need to do fingerprinting? What kind of insurance, etc.?
No,
we just have them fill out a W-9 form when they come on board. That way they can get paid for when they attend their school board meetings, the city council meetings. They get a stipend of, I believe, $12 an hour. It's a little incentive for them to go to these meetings. And that's pretty much all we do. We don't do any special insurance or any fingerprinting or anything like that.
Yeah, and for the peer-to-peer that they do for the community, we also offer $50 stipend for parents to come and share their talents during Food Truck Day. So Food Truck Day generally brings us about 70 people, and we make sure that we tap into community talent to come and share, either have some kind of a cooking class, sewing, I don't know, auto repair, or anything. So that's one of the ways we help out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I see we've come up on 1:30. I will say, for those of you who know me, I'm not speechless very often, but I was very surprised to see the numbers come up the same from the first poll to the second one, and it looks like we had a little glitch with that second poll. So that's going to leave me curious about your interests and your aspirations, and let's see if we can talk about that a little bit. But I want to thank all of you for joining us and staying with us and being really good listeners. And again, just lots of gratitude to Samuel, Nick, and Judith for being willing to share with us their work. And I think in a way it's validating and great ideas for us moving forward. So thank you all for participating.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Samuel and Nick, are you still on? No. Okay.
Thank you
Lydia,
all.
Oh, there you are.
Yep, I'm still here. And here's our references. And I don't know if Judy, you wanted to mention something about this?
No, they're just in the PowerPoint. People can take a look at them.
Okay, great. And then just so everyone knows, our next webinar will be on March 6th from 12 to 1:30. You can register on strategyca.org, and it is titled Community Development FRC Style. So we appreciate everyone for joining. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter. We're on Facebook. And also, we are now on YouTube, so please be sure to check it out and subscribe. So thank you so much for attending, and we will see you next month.
Thank you all. Thank you, Lydia and Alma, as well, for your support.
You're welcome. Bye.
Okay. We had some